Okay, welcome to part 3 of storytelling for your business. Super excited to have each of you here today and for us to wrap up the content today in the next 2 hours. We have a lot to do, and we're going to kind of keep digging into these different types of stories to build your story database this morning. If you haven't yet, please open your chat box and share in the chat a little bit about you, where you're from, and your business, just because I think it helps put some context when you ask a question for the rest of the group. And plus, it's just super interesting to know more about each one of you, I think, for the other people in the room. And before we jump into content, I want to check in and see if anybody has a win or a story that they want to share quickly in the first couple minutes here. Anybody like super excited to share something this morning? No pressure or anything. No stories, no wins? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Oh, all right. Denise, I saw your hand. That's why I do the going once, going twice.
Yes, sorry. So I taught a paper and office organizing class last evening. And just in listening to some of your podcasts and different things, I am a person who usually says what is the wording? That makes sense? And I'm trying to say, did I explain that well, which is good. And I used 2 stories, but now I'm freaked out about the level of detail I'm using. And if I'm making it too long, I'm a little bit caught up in it.
Okay.
But just trying to relax into it a little bit more.
Okay.
But yeah, just people felt it was a super high value presentation.
Good.
That felt good.
It's okay to take a little bit of liberty with some time and let a story kind of unfold a little bit. Now, just be aware that there will be some people that would be like, you told too much story. I actually have gotten that as feedback one time on a free thing that I taught. And then I was like, it was free. Didn't cost you anything to be here. So I feel okay about it. But the rest of the feedback was really good. So you might have one person that's like, I don't like all the story. But for the most part, the rest of the group will love the story. Now, if you're getting lost in the story, that's a different, like if somebody starts to tell a story and then you're like, I feel like this person's lost and they're going all over the place, that's different. But as long as you know, like it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you can, work through those parts, I think people will enjoy it. So don't get too caught up in your head. And remember, it's just practice. Like you're just practicing all the time with stories, and you'll start to realize the nuance and the places where people like really are leaning in or wanting a little bit more, the things that they'll comment back to you, the places where you get a collective response from the group. Like my favorite moments are when a whole group laughs at something that I say that was totally unexpected to me. And it's almost like I take a snapshot in my brain of those moments and be like, I'm not quite sure what I said here that made everybody have a big response or have a laugh, but I want to remember that so that I can do it again and again. And we're going to talk later today about tips for telling a story well. So I'm going to bring some of this back in, but yeah, it's okay to just realize that you're practicing, you're honing your storytelling ability right now, especially if it wasn't something that was kind of a norm for you. So good for you and congratulations, right? For working 2 stories into your presentation last night. Love it.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome those of you who are just joining. So excited to have you here. We are going to jump into content. This is going to be another session where we work. We will also have some time where we're going to like play as a group a little bit in one of the sections today. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are as well. Let me share my screen and we will get started. Kim, will you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Yeah, good. Thank you so much. Okay, storytelling for your business. If you haven't already, please put in the chat box a little bit about yourself. Everybody wants to know who's here in the room. I want to know. I know who you guys are, but I think everybody wants to know about you. So make sure you share. Here is what we're going to talk about today. We are going to continue down this road of building your story database, and I want to teach you a concept that's known as chunking, and we're going to work with it in the form of chunking sideways stories. We're also going to work on some of your surprise benefit stories, and then we're going to wrap up our day with 7 tips on how to tell a story well. So, and then that will bring our day to a close. I am also going to let you know that I have a special offer for those of you who are here today. This is something I'll talk about at the end, but I want to just let you know that it's coming, that there will be an opportunity for those of you who are ready to do a deeper dive with me. There's an opportunity to do that today, okay? All right, let's talk about chunking. I love chunking. Chunking is an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming concept. It is highly effective when you learn how to do it well. And so I want to just give you some example. I want to talk through chunking, and then we're going to actually practice and use chunking sideways. If you have taken a masterclass from me before, specifically if you took the content creation for revenue generation masterclass, we talked in that course, we talked about chunking down. So today we're going to talk about chunking sideways. So there's different times to use different aspects of chunking, but just to give you just a really brief little kind of example here of what chunking is. Chunking is when you take something. So in this case, we're going to say a house. Most of us know what a house is, right? And if we wanted to chunk up, we would say, what's an example, or what is a house an example of? Okay, that would be a chunk up. And in this particular case, we could say a house is a form of shelter. Shelter would be the chunk up. So if we started with shelter, I could say, what is a type of a shelter? And you could chunk down, which would be a house. Or in this case, if we say, we have a house, what is a type of a house? You could chunk down from there, and you could say, a ranch style house, for instance. I had to change this word because I like to use the word rambler, and I said it to somebody recently and they're like, that's not a form of a house, but I Googled it. It is. It's the same thing as a ranch. Anyway, but I put ranch in here in case you guys wanted to tell me that rambler is not a word. Now, we could continue to chunk down from here. We could go, what's an example, or what's a type of a ranch house? And we could just keep going to the place where we actually got to one specific ranch style house on a specific street in a specific town, and we could continue to go down. So that's chunking down. Now, again, I mentioned here that we're going to talk about chunking sideways today. So chunking sideways is looking at, again, we started with the word house, or the object here is house. So if we're going, what is a sideways chunk to a house? It also is going to be a chunk down from shelter. So it would be some other type of shelter would be a chunk sideways of house. So in this particular case, chunk sideways could be something like a cave. People use caves as shelter. We could keep going as different chunks sideways of houses. Not houses, of a shelter in this particular case, but what's something sideways to a house and to a cave? Could be a tent, could be a car even. Sometimes people live in their cars, right? It could be a tarp. It could be, there's so many things that it could be, but what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that we just go sideways over and over and over again. And I'll explain why this is effective in storytelling here in just a second. So just wanted to give you this little chart here for you to think about as we start to learn chunking, and specifically chunking sideways, okay? All right, so chunking sideways stories specifically are used as an alternative yet relatable example to support a point that you're making. They allow the brain to make an association between two things that initially appear to have no relation to each other. Could be. Because if we just said house, cave, shelter or house, cave, tent, tarp, you might be looking at me going like, I don't know if I get it. But somebody else might be like, okay, yeah, I get it. These are all forms of a shelter. This makes sense to me, right? So that's the idea. Our brains love to associate. And the reason to have chunking sideways examples and stories is it because it helps people make sense of something. So chunking is a helpful way when searching for a joint agreement or a solution. It's not your job to convince someone of something. And chunking sideways is a technique to avoid going into convincer mode and instead establish connections and agreement. That's the idea behind chunking sideways. So oftentimes in the sales process, anytime somebody shows up in a consultation with me and says, Nikki, I want you to teach me how to convince people to buy from me, that is a huge red flag. I know right away they're probably not a client for me because they have this mindset issue that they're trying to convince or change somebody's mind about something. And I don't know about you, but have you tried to change anybody's mind lately about something? Did it feel like one of those activities that you're just banging your head against the wall? Probably. So trying to go into convincer mode, trying to convince somebody of something to change their point of view can be pretty futile, I think is the word, futile at this point, especially in our society. So chunking sideways is a way to get out of convincer mode. So one of the things you want to do is you want to start by asking yourself, what's something similar? Or what's another example or form of this? And it can be a person, it can be a thing, or it can be an experience. Chunking sideways is best used in networking situations, marketing for sure, and when someone has some misinformation. Could also say here, when somebody's not quite on board yet with what it is that you do, chunking sideways is a great way to allow their mind to associate, and then they convince themselves, not you convincing them, they convince themselves that, oh, okay, this makes sense to me now. Okay? So we're going to practice. We're going to do a little exercise here. I do want to give you some caution first and foremost, though, with chunking. My suggestion is you never give more than 2 chunk sideways examples or stories. Not always will you give a chunk sideways and people will go like, oh yeah, I get it. There will be times where you'll be in a group of people and you'll give a chunk sideways, and there will be a couple people in the group that will totally light up and be like, yes, oh my gosh, I totally get this now, yes. Whereas somebody else will go like, oh no, that's okay. It just didn't work for them in this moment. You didn't hit that chunk sideways that their brain could make the association to. It's okay. But it's not a convincer strategy. So this is why I would say, if you go more than 2 sideways chunks and people don't get it, you probably want to abort. Like abort this as a strategy in that particular moment. I'm teaching it to you, and we're going to actually do more than 2 chunks sideways in the examples just to play. But that's just also for your brain to start to get used to doing it. But if I'm doing it in a teaching example, I usually won't give more than 2 chunks sideways. And oftentimes if I give 1 or 2, the other person that I'm in conversation with, they will give me a chunk sideways back that makes more sense to them. This happens all the time when I'm coaching with clients. And I always go, yes, that. Because whatever they come up with is better than what I can say. So as long as it makes sense to them, that's the goal, okay? So you're going to want to watch, because people will give you cues when it's working and when it's not working. So an example of working would be that they're nodding their head in agreement. They're giving you positive affirmation, or they're making up their own example of chunk sideways. That's like, okay, this is totally working. They like this technique. It's not working when you get looks of confusion or doubt, when they're negating what you're saying, or they continue to give counter examples. This strategy in that particular moment will not work with this person. Because again, We're not trying to convince. We're just trying to help their minds, their brains make sense of the concept. Okay. So here is the exercise that we're going to play with for chunking. I'm going to have you write out 7 common objections that you get from potential clients. So you can use this in any context you want. In the course of what we're going to play with today, 7 common objections that you get when people are thinking about hiring you. So here are mine. I often get people say things like, oh, I hate selling. That's a common objection. Or I plan to hire a salesperson so that I don't have to learn how to do it. I get told that one too. Or it's too expensive and I don't have the money right now. Number 7 is probably the most common. I'm going to hire you after I book a few more clients. I get this all the time. It's a very common objection to hiring a sales coach. So you already know you have common objections that people give you to hiring you. And that's where we're going to start, and that's where we're going to play today. So I'm going to actually give you a few minutes to do this. How many minutes am I going to give you? Let me look and see where we are. I am going to give you 5 minutes to come up with your own list of 7 common objections. It's probably not going to even take you 5 minutes. It's 9:17 now, so we're going to come back at 9:22. Actually, we're almost at 9:18. We're going to come back at 9:23. Go ahead, go. Write out your common objections. This is on page 31, by the way, of your workbook. Okay, I'm getting a sense that maybe you guys are done. Is anybody still working? Give me a thumbs up if you're still working. Otherwise, we're going to keep going. I feel like maybe you got this. This was probably really easy for you because you hear these objections all the time. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to jump back to the presentation and we're going to keep going here. Okay. So the next part is you're going to take that common objection and you're going to chunk up to another perspective that the client may need to consider. So for instance, people prefer that I educate them, not sell to them. This is one of the common objections. I laugh because it's funny to me. But people tell me all the time, oh, Nikki, people just prefer to be educated. They don't want me to sell to them. So I'm not going to chunk up that exact objection. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it into something that may be useful. So in this particular case, I might say, skills people are grateful to have when they need them. Skills people are grateful to have when they need them is going to be my chunk up in this particular case. So I want you to think of one, and then we're going to play. So I'm going to give you just like I'm going to give you like a minute to do this. Take one of your objections, turn it into something that they may need to consider. And if you struggle with this, we're going to play with this as a group too. So it's okay, but take a minute right now and write one, okay? Okay, hopefully you already have one. If not, it's okay because we're going to play. But let me show you a couple examples now of chunking, how I'm going to take that chunk up and turn it into my chunk sideways. So in this particular case, I'm always going to start with my product or service, or some specific thing. It could be a specific product, or it could just be my business in general. Okay. So in this particular case, I'm going to use selling skills. And the chunk up that I came up with was skills people are grateful to have when they need them. So now I need to think of other sideways chunks that are skills people are grateful to have when they need them. Now, these don't need to be in the same context of selling. As a matter of fact, you're better off when you can take it outside of your own context, so it doesn't sound like you're trying to convince. But I might say to somebody like, things that people are often grateful to know how to do, even if they don't think they need them, is something like changing a flat tire. Useful skill for most of us. Another one might be CPR. Now, am I relating selling skills to the importance of CPR? Yeah, kinda. It's okay. But it's okay to have these like wild chunk sideways as long as there's some relevance, some way for their brain to associate to. Now, you might not resonate with either of these two examples that I gave. That's okay. If I noticed, if I was doing this with you privately and having a conversation and you were giving me looks like, okay, crazy, I would abort the chunking. But just to give you one more, planning a vacation. That's a great skill to have, even if you think you don't need it. Until you go to plan a vacation and figure out where am I going to stay, or if you're not going to hire a professional, and like what are all the things that we need to think about with, bringing family along or any of that stuff that goes into coordinating, like that's a nice skill to have, even if you think you'll never need it. Possibly. Okay. Now I want to do another one just to continue to play. So in this particular case, here's one that I think might relate to all of you. So I already did the chunk up, and it's like things people will pay more money for based on quality. Okay. So of course, my first box is my own product or service. I think this will work for all of you, but we'll see. So if you put your product and service there, now start to think of what are things people will pay more money for when they know they're getting quality. A vehicle, maybe you agree with this one. Maybe it really resonates with you. If you see this and you go like, yes, Nikki, then that means the chunking in this particular example really worked for you. Now, if you're somebody that's like, no, I drive a, 25-year-old car and I would never pay a lot of money for a car. That's okay. It doesn't resonate with you. It's all right. We'll see if this next one hits. People will pay more money for a quality education. Some people, maybe you, maybe not. That's okay. Here's another potential one. This might not work for all of you in the group. Some of us will pay more money for a good quality handbag. You could say shoes. You could say beautiful leather jacket. You could put any context in here. Now notice these seem really far away from selling skills. That's intentional. All I'm trying to do is get their brain to go, yes, I would pay more money for a quality haircut. Therefore, maybe I should pay more money to get a quality photographer, or maybe I should pay more money to get somebody who can really teach me the skill that I need. Not all interior designers are created the same. Not all coaches are the same. We're just trying to get their brain to make that connection without me trying to convince them my services are worth more money than other people charge, because that's a losing battle. Okay, I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to do some as a group. We're going to play with this. So better to start sooner rather than later. This may apply to some of you in your business. So again, in that first box is your product or skill. So now we're going to think of other things that are better to start sooner rather than later. Maybe you already have some of these. Like maybe you're already like, ooh, I know what I would put in the box. I hope so. Retirement planning and investing. I happen to know that we have somebody in our group who I'm going to say she definitely agrees with this. I know because she's a client. She's been teaching me as we're working together. I'm learning all kinds of really amazing things about compound effect. Love that, right? That's for you, Teresa. I know you know that. So retirement planning and investing, getting healthy. Getting healthy is something that's you're better to start sooner rather than later. Learning a foreign language, I think it's been proven. Sooner is better than later if you want to learn a foreign language, even though I still plan to at some point in my life. Yeah. So that might make sense to somebody if they're going like, well, maybe I should wait. Maybe I should hold off on working with you because of this reason or that reason or that reason. And you might say, there's so many things that it's better to start now than later. For instance, most of us don't want to put off retirement planning until we're 65. It's better to start sooner rather than later. My skills or my services, same thing, right? Or, people say that about their health. They always wish they had started sooner. This may be something for you to think about if that makes sense to you. It's another way to kind of give that example. Or are you somebody who's ever wanted to learn a foreign language? Do you wish you had started sooner? This is often what my clients tell me when they start working with me. I wish I had started sooner. That's the chunk sideways way to do it. Okay. So now let's practice. We're going to do these as a group. So I'm going to come back. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we're going to play with this. Okay. Here's what I'd like to do is I want you to share with me one of the common objections that maybe you're not quite sure yet what the chunk up would be. And then we'll play with it as a group. We'll come up with some ideas as a group. Who has one that they want to play with? Seishu, let's hear from you, my friend.
All right. So I have one that I hear from my portrait clients a lot, and it is, my husband and I need to talk first.
Okay.
And it's usually about after I mention pricing. That's what happens.
Okay. So if we need to talk first, we need to think of what is the chunk up here that would make sense, that then we can start chunking sideways. So if anybody has one, type it in the chat box. I'm gonna play with this for a second and see if I can come up with one here. So a chunk up might be things that you're better to move forward with now versus postponing for any reason. Possibly. I don't know if you guys can see Seishu's face. That one didn't totally resonate. That's okay. We'll play with it a little bit. That's the point of playing here. Okay. So that might be a chunk up. Yeah. So we're thinking of chunk ups, a chunk up for, I need to talk to my husband first or my spouse first.
I mean, it is about communication. So, I mean,
Yeah.
do we go in that route where, maybe talking to a significant other during a special time in their life is an important step for them? I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
It could, yeah, that could be. It could also, because again, we're trying to think of things that are chunk up. It could be something that, like the chunk up could be things your spouse are happy you decided on your own. Okay, he liked that one, by the way. Did you see his response? That's how you know this is starting to like maybe. So we'll see. I have a first little glimmer with him. So we're saying things your spouse, what did I say? Things your spouse are happy you decided on your own. So now we're going to play with it and say, what are some of the sideways chunks? Things that you're happy your spouse decided on their own. Gift giving, possibly, right? Like sometimes spouses are glad that you made the decision and I didn't have to be a part of the discussion. Maybe. Could be booking a contractor to come to the house. He maybe likes that one.
Yep.
Karen liked it. Not sure if you guys saw Karen. Karen, when I was doing it, was doing this. That's like that one resonated with her. Might not have resonated with you. Who else has one? Things you're happy your spouse decides on their own. Who has one? Just unmute and say, please, if you have one.
Marry you? Spending money on something special.
Spending money on something special.
Because I tend to be like the frugal, some things. And so if he just goes ahead and does it, it's like, I'm actually pretty happy usually.
Yeah. Now, because we don't always know like the context of the person, we can test these things, but again, we wouldn't necessarily know like if that's okay with Lori, but it might not be okay with, Crystal. Like it could happen that way too. This is why I say you do 2 chunk sideways and then you see how it goes. Who else spoke up? I'm sorry. I heard your voice, but I couldn't see who it was.
It was me. I was kind of joking by saying that you're glad that your spouse decided to marry you.
To marry
that
you?
decision.
Okay. I like that. Yep. Teresa, you have one?
Organizing the family event.
Organizing the family event. Yes. Stacy said what to have for dinner. Man, I so love when Joel chooses and I don't have to. Whew, that's a nice one. I had another one. Who else has one? Social calendar. I see Kim had one. A social calendar. Medical appointments. Yeah. Filling out the census form. I was super glad Joel did that on his own without me having to. Yeah. So what are some things that your spouse is often happy that you just decide? In my family, in our house, we love technology, but I married a very frugal husband, which is super good for me because I'm not. But I am always the one who splurges on technology and he drags his feet. And 2 weeks later, he's ecstatic about what I spent money on that involves technology. So I know this in our marriage. So I have to force his hand. Like I bought him this crazy, the little AirPods a couple months ago. And he's like, I don't need AirPods. He wears those things I swear 7 hours a day, loves them. Best investment I've made in a while in his happiness. Okay. So we don't always know, but this is the idea of chunk sideways, Seishu, that you might work with. Is there anything that your spouse is often happy that you go ahead and make the decision on your own? Now you want to be careful that you're not trying to pin a spouse against the other, or you don't want to cause any conflict, right? Because then you'll lose their business for sure. This is one I would say be careful with, but it is something you can do. So that's the idea is could you dip your toe in the water here and see how people go? And if they get a little no, we have rules in our family, we don't do that type of stuff, abort. Abort chunking sideways in this particular case. Okay, let's do it. You guys want to do another one? Who has one that they want to play with? An objection that you get to people hiring you, and we'll play with it and do a chunk up. Brenda, I see your hand. Hi, friend.
Yeah, mine is that this doesn't align with my beliefs. So, and it's usually in the sense that that's when we've talked about the forgiveness coaching, right?
Yep. So this is the objection. It doesn't align with my beliefs. Okay. So watch Brenda, by the way, because that's where the action is. So we'll see if she likes the chunk up. It's totally fine if you don't, Brenda. The chunk up to me potentially would be things that you once believed that you no longer think are true.
Oh, I like that.
So if we start there, what are things we once believed that we no longer think are true? For many, I hope I don't blow anybody's Christmas here, but Santa. Many of us grew up believing Santa was real. And at some point we learned that wasn't the case. Or real in a context of being a, physical person, right? So that might be maybe somebody would agree with Santa. What are other things that we once believed that we now know are no longer true? The earth is flat. Some people still believe that, Kim. But yes, true. Magic is good. That's a good one. I like that one. That one really resonated with me. Did you see my response? Like that was a true response. Like, oh, I saw magic, right? Like that's when you know chunking works with somebody. That one totally worked for me. That's the kind of response we want to get out of the client. Sometimes I have my, I just show up and be myself. Okay. Who else has a potential chunk sideways? Things you once believed, not you personally, but things that are maybe more common, that things people once believed that now are no longer true. For some people, like very specific gender, could be very specific like gender issues that now people are starting to have a change of mind, change of heart, potentially. Maybe. That might be a little controversial for some people. So you want to think about whether or not you would bring that up, Brenda. That you have to have a degree to be an entrepreneur. That's a good one, Kim. I like that. That for some people, that you have to be married to have kids. Did you guys see Brenda's reaction to that one? That's what you're looking for from your client. Then it's like, ooh, that makes sense to me.
That's a good one.
That's the kind of response we're looking for. Okay. Should we do one more? And then I'm going to give you the opportunity to play with this on your own. Who else has one? Denise, I see your hand, my friend.
I'm too embarrassed.
I'm too embarrassed. Okay, so maybe the chunk up could be things we were uncomfortable with, but yet glad that we did. Possibly. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I've been kind of cogitating on that. That was kind of where.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's play with it and see. We can always change the chunk up too and make different contexts out of it. So like, or maybe it's like things we did scared could be another way to say it, or things we did
that were uncomfortable.
Yeah. By the way, just to like comment on little things here. So a lot of times I'll say something and then I'll say it again and then I'll pause and I'll wait for the client to fill in the word. So Denise filled in the word. She liked the word uncomfortable better than scared. But the way I get her to say it is go like things that I have to give her brain something to associate. This is another form of chunking sideways, by the way. So things that we did scared, or things that we did that, and then I pause and she goes, we were uncomfortable with. That resonates more with, that's her doing her own chunking. Did you guys hear it? Okay, so we're going to play with this now. So things that we do that were uncomfortable, but hopefully glad that we did anyway. So what's an example of things that we do that we're glad we did that we were uncomfortable? For me in my 20s, it was skydiving. Super glad I did it. Never will do it again. Right.
Like learning to ride a bike.
Yes.
Kind of,
learning to ride a bike.
Started college, or.
Yes. Zip lining. Career change. You guys have some good ones here. Presentation in front of people or peers. Woo, Crystal. Yeah, totally. Learning a new skill. Yeah. Things that make us uncomfortable, we're glad we did.
Okay. Awesome.
Writing a book for some people.
Yeah.
A doctor's appointment. Yeah, Susan, that's a good one. Getting married, traveling to foreign places, starting a podcast. That one resonates with me. Yes, being in front of a camera. That's such a great one. Like, honestly, I almost cried before my first photo shoot with Nikki, and I've now done 6, but wanted to cry. I think I did cry on the way there. Playing golf. Yeah. See, you guys are getting this. You're getting this. Like, these are things that people are glad they did, but they were uncomfortable initially. So I'm too embarrassed So we have to give their brain something to go, like, is there ever anything that you've done that maybe you were uncomfortable with initially, but so glad you did?
Yeah.
And sometimes you might have to give them a little example or story, like a chunk sideways. And it could be more than just a phrase. So for instance, like one that just happened in my family this week, my little niece who's learning, she loves basketball. She really wants to be good at basketball. And frankly, she's not that good, but she's got a lot of heart. She made a team that was a like higher level team that you tried out for. She made the team not because of her skill level, because of her heart. Like that's why the coach let her on the team. So right now she's, you know, in this place, like there's no basketball going on, but they are starting to do some private coaching. And she threw a huge temper tantrum when my sister-in-law set her up for a private coaching session this week. She was not going to go. They had this big, huge knockdown blowout fight, not like knockdown like hitting, but like screaming match. She went, came back and was like, Mom, that was the best thing I've ever done. I learned so much, right? And now she knows she can go and have private coaching. But getting her there was like, my sister-in-law was calling me going like, I hate my child. I hate my child. Like, I think I legit hate this kid. She was so horrible about it. Now she's super glad, right? So sometimes you can tell a little story like that and people go like, oh, this just happened to my family too. Yep, I know what you're talking about. Oh yeah, I've had examples in my life where I've been uncomfortable or I felt embarrassed, but oh, so glad I did it. And then you go, yeah, this is what my clients experience when they have me come in. Yes, they might be embarrassed at first, but that is going to go away quickly. And, you know, my guarantee is this is going to be something you are super happy you did anyway.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
To everyone. I love the sexy dress. Tried the sexy dress.
Ah, that's a good one, Kim. Yeah, these are all really good.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to give you some, oh, Stacy, I see your hand, my friend.
A quick question. I know several other people had the one that was, I'm too busy or life is too busy right now. Could that be a similar one? Like things you were unsure about doing, but we're glad you did? Or do you have any suggestions for the busy one?
Yeah, it could be things that you did even in a time where you didn't think you could ever fit it in. Things you accomplished even when you didn't think it was possible. Things you accomplished when you didn't think it was possible might be the way that I would go with that. But again, it has to resonate with the person that you're talking to. So we have to test it. We have to see if it makes sense. One of the, I took this one out just because I've done it so many times, played with it so many times. I had a group that hired me years ago and they had this one, like, it was like a co-op store and they were making these individual like art type things. And actually they were doing all kinds of things like, you know, knitting these beautiful blankets, making these like cool things that would sit on your shelf, you know, like that type of stuff store that you would go in, like a store where you'd buy stuff, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. But the issue that was happening is people would come in and they would see something, they would really like it, but then they'd go like, I'll probably come back and get it next week. But we all know you leave that store, you're not coming back next week to get it. And so when we played with chunking sideways with the people who were working in the store, they were saying like the biggest frustration is that they didn't realize, oftentimes people don't realize that some of those things that were sitting in the store are one of a kind. Even if you come back next week and there's like, this one won't be here. Like it will get sold. So we started talking about what were chunk sideways of things like that you already know when you see it, you have to buy it because it won't be there again. And the group was like kind of pushing back on this concept with me. And I was like, hey, does anybody here shop at Costco? As soon as I said that, half the group knew where I was going. Maybe some of you know. When Costco, if you shop at Costco, when Costco brings in like a specialty like vendor and you see that vendor, they're there that day, you go back to get the item 2 days later, it's gone, right? So we talked about that and they were all like, okay, we all got it. So now that was like an example they could kind of give when people came in the store with the same objection. Okay. here's what we're going to do. We are going to take, let's see, I'm going to give you like 7 minutes to go through and do some chunks, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about them as a group. Okay? 7 minutes, go. Okay, come on back. Come on back. Let's chat about this a little bit. How did it go? And what questions come to mind around chunking? Kim says, good. I see a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about chunking and how to use it?
I still have an issue with the chunking up. It's Brenda.
The chunking up.
Yeah, because like even for the one, like I can't afford it right now. Could you just do that one real quick to help my brain connect it?
Yeah. I can't afford it right now. A possible chunk up to I can't afford it right now might be, let me think about this one. I can't afford it right now is something that the fact that if there's a qualifier like right now would be, well, I'm going to go right to like, if I could offer a payment plan.
Yeah,
that's where I'm going to go. But from a chunking sideways standpoint, I might say, are there, let's see, things that you might, behaviors you may change in order to get what you really want. That might not quite be there yet, but sometimes we make, or things we're willing to give up in order to get the things we want right now. What are things people are willing to give up in order to get the things they want right now? For entrepreneurs, benefits. I'm like amusing myself here with this. Sometimes, right? Like as an entrepreneur, if you come from the corporate world, being an entrepreneur, giving up benefits is a big one, but we're willing to do it to get what we want right now, which is not having to work, in a corporate environment that you don't enjoy, right? For some people, it could be things they're going to give up. It might be sugar. It could be, that shopping spree that you normally do once a quarter. Maybe some of you are like, I don't do a shopping spree once a quarter. That's okay. Susan, did you have one?
Yeah, can I make sure that I'm getting it correctly, which also kind of goes to Brenda's question?
Yep.
Would an answer to Brenda's question be things that you wished you invested in earlier? Does that work?
That could be the chunk up. You want to be careful though, when somebody says, I can't afford it right now. Yes, you could go to like things you're happy that you invested in now versus later. But you also want to be really respectful of not trying to, not try to make somebody feel wrong. That's the other thing. Like chunking isn't about trying to make anybody feel wrong. And so when somebody says, I can't afford it right now, you don't necessarily want to dismiss that as a true objection. What we want to do is give them another way to think about it. So are there things that you've ever been able to like let go of in order to get something that you do right now? And maybe this would fall into there. And, something like, I don't know if you've ever given up, like sugar in order to improve your health, or if you've ever given up, for some people, it's like canceling all your subscriptions so that you can take that money and invest it into a vacation for your family. Or maybe you've given up going on a vacation so that you could invest in your own personal and professional development, right? Like, and all we're doing is we're like dipping our toe in the water and checking to see if this person if they are making the same connection that we're trying to make for them. I still see a look on your face, Susan, that makes me wonder if I'm.
It's not even so much specific to Brenda. I just want to make sure I'm getting the concept of it. So it's almost like I put in the chat box. It's reminding me of that pyramid, $10,000 pyramid show when I was younger, like from the 70s, where you would give a whole bunch of examples and then the person had to guess the topic. Is it similar to that, where here's the topic first? We're doing it backwards. They're giving the examples and then the person has to guess the topic, but we're doing the topic and then giving all the possible
We're
examples.
giving some chunking sideways examples so that their brain starts to make a connection.
But they're related.
So it's like an association. So it is a similar concept. I don't know that game, but it is a similar concept where you're trying to get their brain to associate that, if it's kind of like if somebody goes, well, it makes sense over here with this other concept. So now your thing makes sense too.
Similar to an analogy a little bit?
Yes.
I love analogies, so that makes sense to my brain.
Okay. Yep.
So anybody who watched TV in the 70s knows it.
So it's just something you play with. You play with it in a conversation with somebody when you're not quite sure what to do. Chunking isn't necessarily always the first place that I go for any objection, but we're using objections just for you to play a little bit. And it's this idea of like helping to give people a way for their brain to make sense of a concept without trying to convince them to change their mind. Because
it's a great exercise. It's very helpful.
Very quickly. Sorry, what'd you say?
It's a very helpful exercise to do this. So I'm finding this super helpful to kind of categorize and understand where the objections lie. And then I've been doing that naturally. When I taught, I did that a lot for concepts for students that didn't get certain concepts.
Yes.
And so I made an analogy and it always worked for them. So this is just another way of doing that.
Yes.
But using an objection as your starting point. So that's helpful.
And again, you can do this. You can use chunking sideways in many types of conversation. It doesn't just have to be around objections, right? But I'm using objections because that's something that oftentimes it's good to have this idea of a chunk sideways for, but we could use it for just about anything. I use it constantly when I teach.
It's a great
I have to stop, like even when I was playing a little bit with Denise, like I have to stop and comment to you guys like, I just did this and she just did it herself. Oftentimes I'm not going to stop in the middle of teaching something and go, by the way, I just chunked sideways for so-and-so's based on their question, but I do it constantly. And it's muscle memory. You have to practice it. The better you get at it, the easier it is. And the more, and again, just to be really candid, it doesn't always work. Sometimes I'll do it and people will look at me like, don't get it, Nikki. Don't agree. Not on board. That's okay. Abort, move on to something else.
It's a good skill though. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else question? Otherwise we're going to keep going. Hi, Karen Cooley.
Could you just quickly go through the verbiage one more time? So they say to you, I just want to hear you do the whole thing because you're so good at that. Like they say, this is too expensive. I can't afford it right now. And then you say,
so I understand that you can't afford it right now. Just to check in with you, has there ever been a time when you have been willing to let go of something in order to get something that you wanted? So for instance, like, have you ever, given up your favorite food in order to accomplish something like for health-wise? Or have you ever been willing to cut back in some area of your life so that you could take those funds and pool them somewhere else? Is this something that you would consider like making some type of a concession in order to get this, if this is something that's important to you? So I'm kind of checking. And I'm playing this one. The one that you guys are giving me is probably one that I wouldn't normally chunk sideways on, by the way. But for the sake of playing, you can use it in all contexts. But if somebody voices an objection to me from a sales side, I can't afford it right now. My go-to is usually more along the lines of, if I could offer you a payment plan, is that something you would be interested in? I'm going to go there first before I would go to a chunk sideways. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Okay. We're going to keep going. I'm happy to stay and play with you guys a little bit around this after, kind of as we get to the end of the session today. If you want to practice and play with chunking some more, we definitely can do it. Those of you who are in the society, if you want to do this on Thursday in our check-in call, I'm happy to play with some more chunking with you there as well. All right, I'm going to share screen and we are going to keep going. All right, we are now on page 35 in your workbook, and we're going to talk about surprise benefits. This is the fourth category in the stories that I am suggesting that you start to build your database with. So surprise benefit stories are often overlooked or not yet thought of advantages to your product or your service. And it's your job to clearly lay these out for prospects and clients. You want to give examples and share stories of how others have benefited in non-traditional ways by working with you. This is a seed planting activity. Those of you who know, when I talk about creating curiosity, we got to plant a lot of seeds, a lot of seeds. Surprise benefits are a great opportunity to plant seeds. And so best time to use these stories are when you're networking, when you're definitely in your marketing. And again, as a way to create curiosity is to talk about some surprise benefits. Here's what we're going to do. We're first going to make a list of 7 less than obvious ways clients benefit from your product or service. There are like blatantly obvious ways that clients benefit from your service, but I want you to really dig deep and think of the less than obvious ones. Here are a few that I came up with for my business. By the way, how I came up with these is by teaching and doing the things that I do and hearing the things that people say back to me. I notice and write down and pay attention anytime somebody talks about like a unique experience or benefit they have as a result of something that I teach or train on. Okay. That becomes a surprise benefit that goes on my surprise benefit list. So improved communication skills with friends and family. This I hear often. People rarely think about hiring a sales coach so that they can improve their communication skills with their friends and family, but it's a huge benefit. Increased skill set in conflict resolution, deeper connections with clients, consumer protection for one's own mind when making purchases. We hear this a lot in the Sales Maven Society and in our group, where people will talk about like bad sales pitches and pitches that really turn them off and messaging that they get that turns them off. This is a benefit of learning how to do selling skills right, is that you start to notice when people are not doing it well. People often find that they do less prospecting when they work with me because it takes less prospecting because we're targeting actually interested clients. Higher ROI on marketing initiatives. And then people often report that they share techniques and tips with their family, their friends, their colleagues, and the response that they get from that. So those are my 7. Once I've got my 7 down, then I'm going to go and I'm going to take one of those benefits and I'm going to write out the bones of a story. Okay. Some of you might recognize the story that I'm about to tell. I think a few of you in this society will. So you're going to write down the bones of a past client experience that demonstrates the surprise benefit. So here are the bones. All I need usually is like 1 or 2 of these bullet points. You can write as many as you need. But again, we're not writing out the story start to finish. You're writing just enough to spark your memory. So a college application helped them secure an interview and they made it about the receiver instead of the sender. So I know exactly what story that is just by looking at the bones. So I have a client who used the teaching that I teach around email and effective email strategies. She taught it to her son and her son's girlfriend. They rewrote their college application interview letters and ended up getting the interview and attribute it back to the rewrite of their letters. And that was something they learned from a sales skill training but we're able to apply it to other areas. So that's a huge surprise benefit, right? Most people wouldn't think about that, but it's a good one to drop when I'm talking to moms, when I'm talking to people who have kids that are like high school and going into college, like, oh, I could use these skills to help my kids. Like that would be useful, right? So it's good to have these surprise benefits in your pocket, these surprise benefit stories, and to use them when you're having conversations with people. Again, networking, when you want to create some curiosity, when you are marketing, to share these types of things. So once you write the bones, then you're going to go and identify what type of a story this is. So for instance, I might say the story I just told you is a credibility builder for me, to be able to give something to somebody that they can go teach to someone else and get a benefit. That's a credibility builder. Could also be an influence story, by the way, as well. Okay, so you're gonna practice, you're gonna play now. So I want you to make a list of 7 less than obvious ways that clients benefit from your experience. I'm gonna give you like 3 minutes to do this. I feel like you guys don't need as much time today. So we're gonna come back at 10:16. Go ahead and get writing. This is on page 36 of your workbook. Page 36. Okay, hopefully you have your 7 less than obvious benefits written down. And now I want you to take them one by one, get through as many as you can, and write out the bones of a story that supports that less than obvious benefit that people would get from working with you. Come up with a story. It's okay if you've used this story before. Again, it's like, to use it again is totally fine. But come up with the bones of a story. See if it sparks your interest or sparks your memory is what I'm trying to say, and makes you think of a story with a past client that you could tell here as a potential surprise benefit. And then, of course, I want you to identify what type of story it is. So I'm going to give you a little bit more time to do this one. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do this. We're going to come back at 10:27. Go ahead and get started. Pages 36 through 38. Okay, I'm going to bring you back a minute early because I want to make sure that we have some time to kind of check in with those of you who are struggling to come up with some ideas. I'm happy to kind of play this through with you a little bit. I'm happy to give you some suggestions of what could potentially be stories. Laura Keebart put a great idea of looking back through past testimonials that clients have given as a way to kind of spur this idea for you around story. So thank you, Laura, for that. I love that. And it's okay if you can't come up with 7. I gave you 7 just to start with and play with. You may only, like Crystal says, I can only come up with 3. That's fine, Crystal. Start with those 3. And what's going to happen is as you go about your working with clients, you're going to start to be listening for these. It's going to be in your awareness now. So more will come your way. I can guarantee you of that. It just happens that way. Does anybody want some help coming up with some ideas for what could be potential stories? I did this with one of you just in the chat privately, and the person, I'm not going to say who it was because they didn't do it publicly, but came back and said, yes, this actually, the ideas that I gave did actually spur some stories of things that had happened. So if anybody wants some help, please just unmute yourself and let's talk about it. And you may be helping somebody else by doing this as well.
You can talk about me anytime.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Seishu. So Seishu was saying, I don't think I have any of these stories, surprise benefit stories. So then I just suggested back, like, have you ever had a client talk about gifting a photo to someone who didn't expect it, or someone wanting a copy of a photo that they were surprised that the person actually wanted the picture? And so I said, these are just a couple ideas. Or have you ever had anybody talk about doing a photo shoot or share share a photo shoot that you've done that then spurred somebody to reach out to them and offer them some type of an opportunity or allow for them to reconnect with a friend in some way. These are the things that people often don't think about. And he came back and said, oh yeah, actually that just happened with a client where it was, he got this for his wife and then ordered it for his daughter. And it all started with him getting a headshot, right? Is that right, Seishu? Yeah. Okay. I wrote, just because we're talking photography, but I wrote an article, I don't even know how many years ago, probably 5 years ago, about changing the photos on my website. So it was the first photo shoot I ever did with Nikki. I changed the photos on my website, just updated them, like, put a more professional photo on there. And I actually got a $10,000 client just by changing my photos. And I wrote a blog post about it, which then got shared I wrote it because I thought it was good for people to think about what's the power in the first impression, which is something that I teach. So I was talking about it from that perspective. But that article got shared. I can't even tell you how many photographers shared that article as a way to show to people, like, look what happened. But the $10,000 client that I got, probably over the course of the last 5 years, has paid me easily 50 grand, easily, in 5 years. So it was definitely worth it to update my photos, right? Now that's a huge, compelling story that Nikki shares, like, as her client. So look for those types of stories for yourself. So does anybody have one they want some help with? I'm going to give one more chance here and then we're going to keep going. Going once? Going twice? Lori Nichols?
So what I have experienced a lot of is, and received feedback from, especially my male clients, is I think of it as the surprise benefit is that I'm almost like a wing woman to them in running the business.
Uh-huh.
So it's like succession may be kind of that overarching issue, but it's that kind of personal connection that happens where, again, it's like they have a partner without having a partner, or even if they have a partner, it's like that I'm still their person, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's not, I would say it's probably surprising to them, because a lot of what comes up is just they are good communicators and yet they aren't. And so a lot of the coaching work is around communication skills and building courage to have I would say the conversations that matter with the people that matter on their team. And so I'm never quite sure how to really talk about that communication piece, because they believe that that's not a problem. And yet I know that in the work that I've done the last few years, that that's almost always one of the biggest benefits without it being stated.
Okay, so one of the ways that you might tell that when you're talking to a prospective client, you could say, one of the things clients are often surprised about when they hire me is they are good communicators, but we don't know what we don't know until we have a partner and somebody who has this outside perspective to bring some things to light. And so oftentimes clients find that I am their like wing woman, and somebody that they can trust and rely on, who doesn't have a stake in, whether they go this way or that way. And so it's a non-biased opinion and feedback that allows for them to even expand their communication skills further. Now, I didn't tell a specific story. Okay, I didn't tell a specific story about a client, so we could go to a specific story, but I'm still using that surprise benefit and putting it in there. So if I wanted to tell a specific, and this because I don't know a specific story for you, but if I wanted to make one up and say, I had a client last year that hired me, and the thing that he was most surprised about, he thinks of himself as a very strong communicator. And the thing he was most surprised about, in addition to all the great things that came out of the work that we did, is that I became his wing woman and was able to do this, this, and this for him. And it expanded his communications and skills in ways that he had no idea was possible for him. Now there's a specific story.
I love that.
Okay. Kim, I think I saw your hand, and then we're going to keep going for sake of time. Did I see your hand?
Yes.
Okay.
So I looked through my testimonials and I filled my 7, but I think I'm getting hung up on, I don't remember the specific details of what they put in their testimonial. So is it more like what you just shared with Lori? Because I'm like, I have my 7, but I don't know the backstory anymore because I just have what they wrote out, and that's juicy.
Yeah. So here's what I would say. You could do it the way that I did it for Lori the first time, where I'm not giving a specific example of a specific story. You could do it that way, or just be on the lookout for these and start to, because again, this is why it's so important that you guys are here and taking this course. If nothing else, it's going to start making your brain think like, ooh, that's a potential story. Oh, that's something I can use here, that before you might let it just go like, well, that's nice. But now when you start to go like, oh, that's a story, that's a story, that's a story, it's going to allow you to start to strengthen your data, like fill your database and strengthen your ability to recall these stories, because you just have more awareness around it. So it's okay if you don't have them all yet. Be on the lookout for them is my suggestion. Okay. All right. We're going to keep going.
So
what? Oh, Kim, can I come back to you at the end with this? I didn't mean to cut you off, my friend. I think we have a delay. Okay. Thank you for being gracious with me. I appreciate it. I'm sorry if I cut you off. I did not mean to. Okay. We talked about this. All right. So please turn to page 39 in your workbook, and we're going to start to dive into the tips here. So tip 1 is to be sure you have your listeners' full attention before launching into a story. If you launch into your story too soon, you'll confuse them and they'll be like, what's going on? So be patient. And here are some things that you might say that help indicate a story's coming. So pick the appropriate one here. This is just some sample. You might say, this reminds me of a similar experience a client had. Pause, and then tell the story when you have their attention. Or I'm not going to read all of these because you can read them, but would it be okay to share a client story with you? Is another one. If you ask a question like, would it be okay to share a client story with you? Wait until they give you permission. Don't say, would it be okay to share a story with you? I had a client last year who blah, blah, blah. Like, if you're going to ask a question, pause, wait. That gives their full attention to you now once they've said yes. Okay, so that's tip 1. Make sure you have their full attention. Tip 2, slow down. Really, slow down. Remember, your listener is hearing this story for the first time. And because they're hearing it for the first time, you don't want to rush through the story. So even if there's a part of you that's wondering, like, does anybody care that I'm telling this story? So if you're teaching or if you're just talking to a client, don't rush. Take your time with story. Story needs a little time, because what happens is when people are hearing a story, they always tend to find themselves in the story. So they like go away in their mind for a minute, think of something it reminds them of, and then they bring their attention back to you. So you want to slow down a little bit, especially during story. Let them go away and come back. And they won't always do what I just did, like look away and come back to you. They may just be looking at you the whole time, but over here, there's whole like thing going on in their head. If you, those of you who are Netflix watchers, if you have ever watched the show, it's my favorite show on Netflix. All of a sudden my brain went, what? What's the name of it? It's Karen Cooley, help me out. Do you know my favorite show on Netflix? It's the one with Nina, the doctor. It's something about siblings, but that's not what it's called. Oh, anyway, she has this whole like private life, and she has these whole scenarios that happen. And that's like the perfect example of what happens in people's minds. It's going to come to me. It's my favorite show. I can't believe I can't think of it. Offspring. That's what it is. Offspring. If you've ever watched Offspring on Netflix, she goes away in her mind, and then she'll like come back to the present moment. People really do this. So give them time. All right. Number 3, avoid adding qualifiers to your story. This can really flip somebody's polarity response. A polarity response is you say something and they want to take an opposing view. So you want to be careful about adding qualifiers. So here are some examples of some qualifiers. I'm actually going to read these to you. Phrases to avoid at the start of your story. Interesting story. Because now you just said to them, oh, you're going to be interested in this. And they might go like, not that interesting. Or you go, funny story. By the way, I am guilty of adding qualifiers to my stories. I have to really rein myself in. It's not easy, especially if you love your stories like I do. Here's a story you're going to like. Don't say that at the start of a story. Or let me tell you a story to help you understand my point. Just tell the story. You don't need the qualifiers. At the end of your story, phrases to avoid. Isn't that interesting? It's like saying like, aren't I interesting? People are like, not so much. Wasn't that a funny story? I'm so guilty of that one. Or I knew you'd like that story. I'm also super guilty of this one. Or say to somebody, now you understand. That can be off-putting for people. And the one that we often learn in stories, fairy tales, growing up is this one, avoid doing this. And the moral of the story is, let people decide for themselves, this is an interesting story, or I know what this story means. It's hard when you want to be like, that's the point of me telling you this story, and like really like painting that out, like being like step by step. It's not color by numbers here. Let the client or the person hearing the story make their own sense of it. And if it doesn't resonate in the way that you want, it's okay. It's totally fine. Move on. But let the client have their own experience with your story. Okay. Tip 4 is you want to add a few extra details. People love the details. That's the stuff that oftentimes gets them like, ooh, this is good. So you're going to add a few extra details. You can add things like the who, the what, the where, the why, the when, or the how. Okay. So I'm going to give you some examples, and then I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes and do this yourself. So I have a story that I tell that is my like origin story. How did I start my business? And I often start the story by saying, it was a Saturday morning in San Jose, California. That detail doesn't make or break the story. It brings the story to life. Because now it gives people to go like, oh, where would I be on a Saturday morning? Or, oh, I've been to San Jose. Or like, why would Nikki be in San Jose? So you just need to add like a little line like that into your story. So I'm going to ask you in a minute to pick one story of the bones that you wrote down, and I want you to just add a little bit of detail. It can be one sentence, something simple like this. Here's another one where I often tell this story where I say, you know, at the end of the breakfast, I was standing having a conversation with one of my VIP clients, and we were in the corner of this room. There were 100 women that were at this breakfast, and they were filtering out of the room. But there was one woman who started making her way towards us, and I could see her out of the periphery of my vision here. She was like making her way around these big round tables. Okay. And then I tell the story. Now, I could just say, this woman walked up to me at an event and she said, "Are you Nikki Rausch?" I could do that. It's not as interesting as if I add a little bit more detail. I start to paint a little bit of a picture so that they can then let their mind paint the rest. Okay? Or I could say at the start, so the third one here, I'm just going to say like, so I went to have a to do a client experience. Somebody hired me to do a client experience for them, and she was an esthetician, and here's what happened. Okay. But instead, I could tell it as a story, and I could say, you know, she'd gone to all this trouble. She set up this relaxing environment. There was soft music playing in the background. She had wrapped this warm blanket around me. She'd even dimmed the lights overhead to just not hurt my eyes. And yet, and then I tell the rest of the story. That's going to draw people in more than you just giving the like facts here. So even though I have you practicing by writing the bones, you're not just giving the bones. You've got to add some oomph to it, add some nuance, add some detail. All right, so I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to do this. I want you to take one of the story bones. It could be from any of the ones that we worked on so far, even last week. And I want you to add just a little bit of detail. Okay, 2 minutes, go. All right, come on back. Happy to answer questions about this. We're going to save them to the end just for the sake of time. We're going to save any additional questions to the end. So I want to give you the last 3 tips, and then we are going to bring the training to a close, and then I'll open it up to Q&A. All right. So tip 5 is you want to tell your stories often. Practice with a story and use it in every client situation that it has any relevance. Learn to tell your stories often, because it builds that muscle memory. It makes them like right there, ready for recall anytime you need it, because you're like, oh, I know this story. We used to talk about this when I was going through my neurolinguistic programming training, and we would go and we would learn a process in the training. So it was some type of a process. It was a guided process. You would take somebody through this guided process. And one of the things that we learned is that for the month that we were apart, we met once a month for this training. So the month that we were apart, we would go back into our lives and into our work, and we would just use that like one process, and with everybody, regardless of what was going on in their life, we would use a process that might not even be relevant, because like storytelling, NLP is done in the minds of the listener or the explorer, is what we would call the person that was being guided. Because it's happening in their own minds, they'll make sense of it. So don't be afraid to tell a story where you're like, I'm not even sure if this is relevant here. Test it and see. Just try it out. See what happens. And here is an exercise. Normally, if we were together live in a group, I'd have you break and we would go and do this with a partner. So I'm gonna suggest that you do this with a partner on your own. And it's called taking your stories for a walk. So you take a partner and you just have them say, I'm gonna practice telling you a story. And you tell the story as if you're gossiping, frankly, like, oh girl, I got something to tell you. And then you like tell the story. You don't have to add the oh girl if you want, or if you don't want, that's fine. But go ahead and take your stories for a walk. When you walk and talk your stories, they make them easier for recall too. So it's good for your brain. Now you might advise your listener to just like the person that's on the walk with you, like maybe to just let you tell it. If you're practicing this with somebody who also wants to tell their story, like I always say, give some nonverbal cues to the person, like a little head nod if you're person B and you're listening, and then you switch, and then person B tells the story and you walk and talk it. Now, sometimes that you might not have a person to do it with. That's okay. I practice my stories sometimes just when I'm driving in the car. So I drive and talk my stories often. So I'll be driving and I just practice telling a story, and I just tell it like I'm telling it to a girlfriend or a friend or telling it to my husband. Sometimes I do make him sit in the car and listen to, but that happens. Sometimes I just tell them to myself, but I tell them out loud because it helps to tell it out loud. You start to realize like, where's the nuance, or where's the like, oh, I'm really fumbling this part, or I'm stumbling over this word, or like, am I making the connection or not? So you've got to practice. So walk and talk your stories, or drive and talk your stories, whatever you want to do, but tell them out loud and tell them often. Number 6 is make sure that when you're telling your story that you act as if you're telling it for the first time. So even though you're going to use these stories over and over again, you don't want the listener to feel like, oh, she's bored with her story. So you got to act as if like, ooh, this is the first time I'm going to tell this to you. So you want that excitement to come through. So tell it like it's the first time, because for the listener it is, and you're telling the story for the listener's benefit. So tell it like it's the first time. Let that enthusiasm shine through when you tell the story. Be interested, be excited to share it. Not like, oh, that reminds me of a story that I've told a million times, right? Tell it like it's interesting. And then last tip here is give yourself permission to emphasize certain parts of the story. You don't have to tell every little piece of the story every time. And it's okay even to take some liberty. Use your discretion, maybe change a few details here and there to make the story relevant to the person that you're talking to. Make sure you stay in integrity when you're telling it. So I do recommend that your stories are true. Don't make up a story, but it's okay to like emphasize a certain detail or change, like to protect the innocent, protect like the type of client it was or who the client was. It's okay to do that. Sometimes when I'm telling stories, depending on who I'm telling it to, I might use like a female version in the story. Other times I might use a male version in the story. Like use your discretion, stay in integrity, and emphasize certain parts, but it's okay to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room with storytelling. Okay? All right, believe it or not, that is going to bring to close. We have done everything in the workbook so far, except for filled out your last little section here on page 42. In just a second, I'm going to ask you to turn to page 42. Before I do that, I mentioned at the beginning, I do have a special offer for this group. This is only being offered to you. I offered this back in February to my whole list. Some of you actually took advantage of this offer. It's called the Achiever Package. And when I was thinking about what you might need right now, I wanted to bring this offer back just for this group. So you won't see this anywhere else. You may never, ever see this offer again. But if you would like to take advantage of it, here it is. You get 3 strategy sessions with me. Basically, you're paying for 1 strategy session and like 1 3/4 of a strategy session, but you're getting 3 for that price. And I'm including lifetime membership to the Sales Maven Society for you to sign up for the Achiever Package. The 3 strategy sessions, you can use them anytime you need them in the next 12 months. And the lifetime access just means like you're in our group for as long as it's around, as long as it is in existence. So if you add up, if you bought these things individually, like realistically, the standard price of this is $3,725. Here's the deal for you guys on this. Only the people that are in this class get this access to this right now. You can buy this package for $990. So it's $2,735 savings. It is a rockin' deal. When I sold it in February, it's by far been my most successful promotion I have ever done. The people who are taking advantage of it is giving us an opportunity to really work on the things that they need in their business right now. So if you're somebody who wants to either work on some of your stories and how to relate them into your business or anything sales related that you would like my support on, this is an opportunity for you to have these 3 strategy sessions in your back pocket to use when you need it. There's a bit.ly link there for you. There will be an email that goes out to those of you who haven't already signed up for this package. Right here, it's the bit.ly/achiever. That's capital A-MC. So that's for Masterclass. That's also capital A. So you need to use that specific bit.ly link to take advantage of this deal. If you already bought this deal and you recognize that just even the strategy sessions on their own and you would like to buy it again, I will allow you to gift the lifetime access to somebody else, because obviously you can only have lifetime access once, but I will allow you to gift the lifetime access to someone else. and you can use those strategy sessions yourself. Totally up to you if you would like to use it. So that brings this piece to a close. Please take a moment, turn to page 42, write down your 1 to 3 takeaways from today's section, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to do that. Okay, go ahead. All right, come on back. Who has a question, a takeaway that they want to share, even if it's anything about the class? I'm happy to hear, happy to answer questions. Who has one they'd like to share? Or, hi, Stacy, go ahead.
So I'm curious, Nikki, do you have suggestions for how to organize these stories? Because I'm really excited to start creating that database of stories. And it's like my mind is so focused on structure usually that I'm like, oh, should this be a Word doc or should it be an Excel spreadsheet? Like, how do you organize your stories?
So when I first started my story database, I put it as an Excel spreadsheet because I like to be able to search it. So I have the different, columns. And then one of them would be, I would put tags, like how I do tags now in my list management too. But I would put some tags, is this a story that demonstrates the power that I might put first impression, or I might put rapport, or I might put, testimonial or credibility, or I would come up with a list of tags, and then I could search the story based on that. And then it would pop up here's all the stories that relate to a first impression, right? And then I could look through, and I do that because sometimes when I'm creating content to teach, I like to add a story usually to about every section. You guys may have noticed that I will tell at least one little story. So sometimes I'm like, I don't know what story to tell here. I can go back to that list and search for it. So think about how you might organize it. And it's okay to start and go this doesn't work for me. I need to start a different way. I like Excel because it's searchable. That's why I do it.
Do you use those same tags with your list management? I mean, I don't know if you have any correlation for how you're outreaching to people in your groups.
Yeah, in my list, we don't use the same tags, although I do use the tags in the Sales Maven Society is now searchable. So we use a lot of the same tags that I would use. I don't know if you saw it yesterday, but somebody had asked a question about, Nikki, how do you pre-frame a webinar? And so I said, go back to the training center, type in pre-framing, and you'll see all these different stories. And some of them are, PDFs of content that I've written about pre-framing. Some of them are actual training content. So maybe start with some keywords for you, Stacy, things that you're going to want to talk about a lot, and create your core key list, key, basically. I feel weird saying key twice, but you know what I mean? It's your key. And then those you're going to pick from there. And then you can start to categorize things from there. That's how my brain works, but you might have a totally, your brain might be like, what? I don't like that. It's okay. Change it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Seishu, hi.
Hi. So you may have already talked about this, but in terms of delivery, the, the the series of lessons we've gone through sort of are setting us up for delivering the stories verbally to somebody in front of us. How do you translate that to somebody you're writing to, whether it's an email or a blog post or a social media post? Is that something we should be sort of considering as well?
Yeah. I mean, for sure you want to be pulling some story into it. I do personally think if I'm going to write a blog post, it's going to have a story, some type of a story in it. And sometimes the story will be like a sentence or two, and sometimes the story will be like 3 paragraphs, depending on what it is. I will try to say when I'm writing, I know that people are scanning, so I'm trying to be a little more succinct. So I might not give as much detail or as much nuance. I think when in writing, I think you need to be more clear in your language because all that people have is the words. But whereas when you're telling the story live, you know, you can kind of fumble and bumble and add some extra words here or there, and people will give you grace around it because, like, I can't remember, we can process a certain like bits of information versus how fast people actually talk. So we can process when we're live with somebody much faster than they can talk, frankly, unless maybe that's not totally true. It depends on your thinking pattern. But for the most part, we can take in what somebody's saying to us and like make sense of it. So we'll give them some grace. They can have some extra words. They can get a little lost and come back. It's okay. But in an email or in a blog post, people aren't going to give you the grace. They want it clear, succinct. So oftentimes I will write out a story and then I will go back and I will look for ways to shorten a sentence, be more clear. Like I will restructure the sentence to make it like more pointed. I don't know if you've noticed, I do this oftentimes when I'm offering you guys rewrites in the Sales Maven Society on your messaging. I will shorten a lot of your sentences. I'll take out a lot of stuff that I'm like, you don't need to say that. Like the point's there, you made it, move on. Did I answer your question, Seishu? Yeah, okay, good. I feel like I saw another, did I see another hand? Somebody else wanna ask a question and or offer a takeaway from today? Going once. Crystal?
I think what I really from today, what my aha moment was having making connections to stories to be relatable with the chunking that are not within the business, right? To take something that is outside of the business. I think we get so tunnel visioned on what we're trying to sell, you know, our service or whatever it is that we just sort of only think in that mindset as opposed to going outside and giving examples that have nothing to do with what our service is. And I think that was a big, you know, wow, yeah, I can use that. So I think that was awesome.
Good. I'm glad. And people will like that about you, that you can bring in things that are outside of specifically what it is that you do. And it just helps their brain make sense of things. Like our brains love to make connections. That's our brain's like main job, make connections.
I mean,
so
yeah, I love analogies too, because that's how I better understand, like analogies are examples. And so for me to be able to do that, I'll feel like I'll be able to be more clear on the message for sure.
Yeah, good. I'm excited. Please continue to share your stories and your successes as you go out and implement these techniques. I would love to hear. I mean, I love when you guys reach out with your success stories. They get shared a lot in the Sales Maven Society, but if you're not in the Sales Maven Society, like, please still reach out to me. I want to hear from you. I love to hear your success stories as you use things. I remember teaching this concept 2 years ago to a woman who, like, about every 3 months, she would send me a picture that she would take on her cell phone. It was like, look at this example of chunking sideways, Nikki. And she would have like these fun pictures that she would send from her travels. And I just love that. So that feeds my soul. I love to hear from you. Who else? Question, comment? Anybody want to share another takeaway? I know we're a little over time, so hi, Lori.
So just a big thank you, because I have taken this class before, but I need repetition. And so I feel like I just got a lot out of it. And in particular, it's just that realization that I feel like I have a better list of those surprise benefits than I was consciously aware of.
Good.
So I think that's a big part of what taking this class again has done for me, is helping to kind of excavate a bit in terms of what those benefits are. So
good.
Great.
Good. Happy to have you. Thank you. By the way, just from a sales perspective for all of you, never be afraid to offer your clients who've been through something with you to allow them to come back through it, because there's some huge benefit to them to come back through and hear something from you a second time or work with you multiple times. Never be afraid to offer that. So I think, Lori, actually, this might be your third time in this class, is it? It's your second? Okay. And I think, Kim, you were with us. You were with us last year when we taught this. It was last summer. I feel like you were in the room. Yeah. I feel like we ate lunch together. That's what I'm remembering. Kim and I
think Kim was in the room too.
Yeah. I feel like you were, Kim. If you weren't, then I definitely missed you. No?
I wasn't here last summer.
You weren't. Okay. I don't know why. I'm thinking of another class then, but yeah. Okay. So let your clients come back through.
We did the
stuff.
chunking before.
We've done chunking before.
Yeah.
I feel like Kim and I have a delay, so I have to wait. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for participating. This is an absolute pleasure. I feel incredibly honored that you take time out of your day, out of your work day, to spend time with me and learn these concepts. Please keep in touch if there's anything I can do to support you. If you have some feedback about the class that you would like to give, good, bad, or other, please send that to me in an email. I'm happy to hear that from you. Some of you know from the podcast that I did about who gets in your sales mindset. I probably won't read them until tomorrow, but know that I do want to hear them. So please feel free to reach out to me about that. And then I see that there was a private question from one of you about the offer. Yes, reach out to me. Please reach out to me privately. I'm happy to talk that through with you. And if you want to jump on a quick call and talk about it, we can do that as well. Whatever makes sense for you. Okay. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Get out there, tell your stories. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.